Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm excited to be here today to discuss a topic that's both timely and important. Our presentation is titled, "We Don't Need Men, the Most Dangerous Lie of Modern Culture." Over the next few slides, we'll explore how society's view of men and masculinity is evolving, why that matters, and what implications it has for us all. So let's dive in and take a clear, honest look at these issues together. So why do we see these gender disparities in these fields? Well, it's a mix of factors: biology, personal preferences, risk tolerance, individual strengths, and interests. The reasons are pretty complex, but when you look at the numbers, they're quite clear. This isn't about excluding women or keeping them out of these industries. Women can certainly enter these fields, but the reality is that very few choose to do so. On a day-to-day basis, the people building, repairing, and maintaining the infrastructure that keeps our modern world running are overwhelmingly men. For example, in the construction industry overall, only about 11% of workers are women, and most of those are in administrative roles rather than in the field. Let's zoom out even further to the broader picture in the U.S. labor market in 2024. Overall, women make up roughly 8% of workers in these roles. For instance, in water and wastewater treatment, about 11% are women. In trash and recycling collection, it's around 4%. Roofers, about 3%. And electricians, fewer than 2%. When you flip a switch and expect the lights to turn on, it's often the work of these electricians, line installers, and electrical repairers that makes it happen. These roles are critical because they're what keeps civilization turned on, running smoothly and safely. It's important to understand these numbers and the underlying factors. They highlight the need for more inclusivity and opportunities for women in these essential industries. Men are often seen as the disposable guardians of society, expected to risk their lives quietly and without much recognition. In fact, in 2023, over 91% of workplace fatalities were men, highlighting how much they put on the line. And it's important to remember, these roles cost something. They're not glamorous jobs, and they're not widely praised, but they are absolutely essential for our safety and well-being. Take the oil and gas industry, for example. About 80% of workers in the U.S. are men, and offshore rigs abroad often have around 97% men working on them. And some of the most dangerous environments are staffed overwhelmingly by men. Firefighters, for instance, overwhelmingly male. Local police forces are about 86.5% men. Special operations units, more than 90% men. Even in combat arms like infantry, armor, and artillery, women make up around 4,800, but the units are still over 90% male. Similarly, the U.S. active duty military is composed of roughly 82.3% men. So when we think about who's protecting society when things go wrong, it's men in defense, safety, and those often invisible roles that truly form the shield that keeps us safe. This is not oppression, it's human nature. Again, it's not because women lack talent, but rather because interests differ. For example, women are roughly 17% across engineering disciplines. And in the core fields like mechanical, electrical, and civil engineering, the backbone of our infrastructure, women are still a minority. Even among the engineers who design our cities and systems, this disparity remains clear. Yet, despite these facts, only one gender is socially shamed for acknowledging its role. The truth is simple. Men and women contribute differently, and both kinds of contributions matter equally. But recognizing these differences doesn't mean we should erase reality. Women contribute too, and in enormous, meaningful ways. Often, the reaction is defensive. People feel uncomfortable when it's acknowledged that men built roads, bridges, energy grids, skyscrapers, railways, and all the infrastructure that modern life depends on. And this brings us to a provocative point. Some say men built society, and that statement can trigger strong reactions. But the key here is understanding that acknowledging the contributions of men and women doesn't diminish anyone's value or effort. It's about appreciating the full picture of how society has been built, by both genders, in different ways, but equally important. This isn't about pandering or making anyone feel comfortable. It's about really understanding an emotional reality that men have been forbidden to speak about for too long. And here's the hard truth. You are part of the problem if you turn a blind eye to this. If you don't care that men are dying at 4 times the rate of women, I'll say this plainly. Some people just shrug it off. Some women even celebrate the idea that men are struggling. But the numbers don't lie. We can debate social issues endlessly, but the reality remains. Men are not okay. And what's even more alarming is that this pattern continues into 2024. The projections for 2025 look just as grim. Suicide has now entered the top 10 leading causes of death in the United States, with nearly 49,000 deaths last year alone. And let's put that into perspective. Male suicide rates are 4 times higher than women's. Men account for about 80% of all suicide deaths. In 2023, the situation hasn't improved much. Society may chant, "We don't need men," but behind the scenes, men are facing one of the quietest mental health crises of our time. Here's the part we don't talk about enough. Men are suffering deeply. This isn't just about statistics. It's about real human lives, real pain that's often invisible. We need to acknowledge this truth if we're going to make any meaningful change. Many men suffer silently, feeling the weight of expectations and judgments, often without anyone to turn to. The world tends to punish men for speaking up, which only deepens their sense of isolation. Under that immense pressure, the idea of just walking away or giving up starts to seem like a real solution. When sleep becomes elusive, pain becomes a constant companion, and each new day feels heavier than the last. Around 3 a.m., when the world is quiet and the mind is racing, men often find themselves alone. No crew, no community, no brotherhood, just small talk on the surface and silent suffering underneath. This lack of genuine connection creates what I call thwarted belonging, where men believe everyone would be better off without me. They feel burdensome, convinced that they are toxic, worthless, or the problem itself. Culture adds fuel to this fire with messages like "men are toxic" or "men are the problem," which only deepen feelings of shame and hopelessness. Men can start to believe, "I can't fix this," or "there's no way out," trapping themselves in a cycle of despair. And then life throws crises, breakups, job losses, health scares, financial setbacks, that push men further into this entrapment. These moments often don't announce themselves loudly. They creep in quietly, making it even harder to recognize the danger. Most importantly, what men are feeling during these times is defeat. It's a slow, sinking feeling that gradually takes hold, making them feel like they're slipping away, often feeling like they're fighting battles nobody else sees. This is the reality of what it feels like to be a man who's slipping, overwhelmed, isolated, and in silent pain. This slide highlights a powerful contradiction that many men are facing today. On one hand, they're told to be a provider, which has traditionally meant supporting their families financially and being the breadwinner. But at the same time, there's this other narrative that criticizes them for expecting gender roles, calling them toxic if they stick to these traditional expectations. And then, there's this harsh message that they're disposable because women don't need men in the same way anymore. For many men, losing a job isn't just about losing income, it's about losing their sense of identity. Society still heavily ties a man's worth to his productivity and his ability to provide. Yet, at the same time, there's shame attached to men wanting to fulfill that provider role. If we look at the data, male labor force participation has been declining for years, especially among men without college degrees, whose wages have been shrinking for decades. Meanwhile, more marriages now feature women as the primary or equal earners, which shifts traditional dynamics. But here's the reality. Economic changes have not been fully reflected in cultural expectations. A large majority of adults, about 71%, still believe that a man must support a family financially to be considered a good partner. This disconnect between cultural expectations and economic realities creates what we can call a male identity crisis. It's a crisis we've contributed to by holding on to outdated notions of masculinity that no longer align with the world we live in today. The lie that men are unnecessary isn't empowerment, it's societal suicide. We truly need each other. Not in a patriarchal way, not in a hierarchical way, but in a deeply human way. The truth is simple. A world without men would collapse, and a world without women would also collapse. Women bring connection, intuition, empathy, relational insight, and emotional intelligence, gifts that are just as vital as anything else. Men, on the other hand, have built and maintained infrastructure. They bear physical risks, defend nations, protect communities, and often carry emotional burdens quietly because they feel they must. But at the core, human society is interdependent. It's not about women being weak or men being superior. It's about recognizing that we need each other. So, do women need men? Yes, and understanding why that matters is essential for truly appreciating our shared humanity. And if you're still ready to die on the hill that we don't need men, then I pray you never have to live in a world where you find out what that truly means. Strong men and strong women build strong societies. Weakening one weakens both. Because the truth is this: reject misandry with the same force we reject misogyny. Allow men to speak without being mocked. Encourage connection, purpose, and belonging. Provide real emotional support for men. Celebrate male contribution openly. Restore dignity to masculinity. To save men and society we must. What we must do now